Imagine a $5 shirt. Seems like a steal, right? But what if that price tag came at the cost of a human life? In 2013, over 1,100 garment workers were crushed to death when the Rana Plaza factory collapsed in Bangladesh. Workers had spotted cracks in the building, but when they tried to stay home, managers threatened to fire them. The next day, the building collapsed. Those workers died making clothes that cost less than your morning coffee. And some of those clothes are still hanging in closets just like yours. This is the real price of that $5 shirt. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how the fast fashion industry has built a global empire on human suffering, environmental destruction, and corporate lies, and why your favorite brands don't want you looking too closely at their supply chains. By the end of this video, you'll never look at clothing the same way again. 2. The crime scene, inside modern sweatshops. Imagine walking into a factory where hundreds of workers are crammed together in stifling heat, the rapid-fire clicking of sewing machines creating a deafening cacophony that never stops. This isn't some historical scene from the Industrial Revolution. It's happening right now in cities across Bangladesh, Vietnam, and China. The reality behind your $5 shirt is far more disturbing than most consumers ever realize. Let's step inside one of these factories in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The air is thick with fabric particles, making it difficult to breathe. Workers sit hunched over machines for 12 to 16 hours straight, their backs permanently curved from years of the same repetitive motions. There are no breaks, not even to use the bathroom without permission. The factory floor is littered with loose wiring, chemicals stored in unmarked containers, and emergency exits chained shut to prevent theft. A deadly practice that has contributed to numerous factory fires over the past decade. What's particularly jarring is how these conditions stand in stark contrast to the gleaming retail environments where these same garments end up. While you browse air-conditioned stores with carefully curated displays and cheerful music, the people who made your clothes work in conditions that would be illegal in most Western countries. This isn't accidental, it's by design. Brands deliberately keep their manufacturing facilities hidden from consumers, operating behind layers of contractors and subcontractors. The human cost of fast fashion extends far beyond poor working conditions. Workers face constant threats and intimidation. One Indonesian woman working at a factory supplying major brands reported that male managers regularly demanded sexual favors in exchange for job security, threatening termination if they refused. These stories aren't isolated incidents. They represent a systemic pattern of abuse that keeps workers trapped in a cycle of exploitation. Physical punishment for failing to meet impossible quotas is commonplace. Workers report being slapped, beaten, or forced to stand for hours in the hot sun if they fail to meet production targets. These targets are deliberately set beyond what's humanly possible, ensuring managers always have an excuse to deny breaks or force unpaid overtime. The psychological toll of working under constant threats and surveillance creates an environment of perpetual fear. The financial exploitation is equally shocking. Many garment workers earn as little as 50 cents per hour, a rate so low that even working excessive overtime won't lift them out of poverty. To put this in perspective, a worker might spend an entire day making hundreds of garments while earning less than the cost of a single item they produce. According to Oxfam, 91% of Bangladeshi garment workers struggle to afford enough food for themselves and their families despite working full-time plus overtime. Wage theft compounds this poverty. During the COVID-19 pandemic, many brands simply canceled orders when retail sales dropped, leaving factories unable to pay workers for items already produced. A study by Sheffield University found that wages dropped by an average of 11% compared to pre-pandemic levels, pushing already vulnerable workers deeper into poverty. Even in normal times, unpaid overtime, arbitrary deductions for minor infractions, and denied breaks are standard practices. What makes this exploitation particularly egregious is that it violates numerous international labor laws. The freedom to form unions, a right protected by international conventions, is routinely denied to garment workers. Child labor persists in certain factories despite being prohibited by international standards. Forced labor conditions, where workers cannot leave their jobs due to debt or coercion, have been documented across the industry. The enforcement of these laws remains weak due to corruption, insufficient resources for labor inspectors, and the deliberate complexity of supply chains. Brands maintain plausible deniability by working through multiple layers of contractors, allowing them to claim ignorance when abuses are exposed. Meanwhile, their business model demands the lowest possible prices from suppliers, creating impossible pressures that inevitably lead to corner-cutting on safety and labor standards. Women bear the brunt of this exploitation. Making up nearly 60% of the global garment workforce, according to the ILO, women face additional layers of discrimination, including gender pay gaps and sexual harassment. Their voices are systematically silenced, creating an environment where abuse can continue unchecked. The U.S. Department of Labor's list of goods produced by child labor or forced labor includes garments from multiple countries, confirming the industry's reliance on exploitative practices. 3. The smoking gun, Rana Plaza, and the evidence trail. The silencing of workers would reach its deadly culmination on April 24, 2013, when managers at Rana Plaza threatened to withhold an entire month's wages from anyone who refused to enter a visibly cracking building. This impossible choice, forced upon thousands of Bangladeshi garment workers, exposes the true calculation behind every $5 shirt hanging on retail racks worldwide. The day before the collapse, large cracks appeared in the Rana Plaza structure, triggering immediate alarm. Shop owners on the lower floors recognized the danger and promptly closed their businesses. The building's structural integrity was clearly compromised, a fact acknowledged by everyone except those with production deadlines to meet. Despite the obvious risk, factory owners on the upper floors made a decision that would prove catastrophic. They ordered their workers to return the following morning. Workers arrived at the building that fateful April morning with a horrifying awareness that their workplace could collapse at any moment. Many hesitated at the entrance, looking up at the visible cracks that had grown overnight. But supervisors stationed at the doors delivered a brutal ultimatum: enter the building or forfeit your entire month's salary. For people living paycheck to paycheck with families to feed, this wasn't just financial pressure, it was a death sentence either way. Work and risk immediate death, or refuse and ensure your family's slow starvation. The vibrations from industrial sewing machines and generators on illegally constructed upper floors proved too much for the compromised structure. At approximately 9 a.m., the 8-story building collapsed with thousands of workers inside. The crashing concrete and machinery created a horrific scene. Bodies crushed, limbs severed, and workers trapped beneath tons of rubble. Many still alive but unreachable by initial rescue teams. Rescue efforts continued for weeks, with volunteers digging through dangerous debris, often using only their bare hands. The final death toll reached 1,134 people, with over 2,500 injured, many permanently disabled. Survivors described the terror of those final moments: the sudden shaking, the screams of colleagues, and the darkness as floors pancaked onto each other. One survivor recounted hearing the cries of trapped co-workers for days afterward, voices that gradually went silent as rescue teams failed to reach them in time. Perhaps the most damning evidence came from the rubble itself. As rescue workers cleared the debris, they discovered clothing labels and documentation that directly implicated major Western brands who had initially denied any connection to the facility. Tags from Benetton, JCPenney, Mango, Primark, Walmart, and Inditex were recovered from the site, physical proof that these companies were producing garments in this death trap, despite their public statements to the contrary. The discovery of these labels exposed a deliberate system designed to shield fashion brands from accountability. Through complex subcontracting arrangements, many brands maintained what executives called plausible deniability about the actual conditions where their products were manufactured. A factory might receive an order from a company that had passed safety inspections, only to secretly pass that work to unaudited facilities like Rana Plaza, where costs were lower and deadlines could be met regardless of safety concerns. The building itself embodied the industry's reckless pursuit of profit. Originally designed as a 6-story structure for commercial offices and retail, the owner had illegally added 2 additional floors, specifically to house garment factories. The heavy industrial machinery installed on these floors, far exceeding the building's load-bearing capacity, created constant vibrations that weakened the structure over time. Engineering experts later confirmed that these vibrations, combined with the construction of additional floors without proper reinforcement, directly caused the collapse. Documents recovered after the disaster revealed that multiple brands had been warned about safety issues at their production facilities in Bangladesh, but continued operations to meet seasonal deadlines. Internal emails showed executives discussing the risk calculation of continuing production versus the cost of delays, essentially weighing production schedules against human lives. The Rana Plaza collapse laid bare the true cost of fast fashion's business model: deliberate negligence, systematic exploitation, and ultimately mass casualties. This wasn't an unpredictable accident, but the inevitable result of an industry structured to prioritize profit margins over human safety. The disaster exposed how production deadlines and cost-cutting measures weren't just business decisions, but potentially lethal ones. 4. The kingpins, brands behind the exploitation. 10 years after Rana Plaza, you might assume the industry cleaned up its act. Yet today's most popular shopping apps selling $4 dresses operate on business models that make those deadly factories look almost regulated by comparison. Behind those impossibly cheap prices lies not efficiency, but exploitation on an unprecedented scale, now enhanced by sophisticated techniques to evade accountability. Shein's meteoric rise to fashion dominance represents the evolution of fast fashion into something even more troubling. While traditional retailers might release new styles weekly, Shein uploads thousands of new designs daily, creating a hyperactive production cycle that intensifies pressure throughout their supply chain. This pressure inevitably translates to worsening conditions for workers at the lowest levels. The evidence of exploitation isn't speculative. It comes directly from the companies themselves. Shein's own 2023 sustainability report contains a shocking admission: the discovery of child labor within its supply chain during the first 9 months of that year. While the company claims to have suspended orders from these suppliers until corrective actions were implemented, these measures, terminating contracts with underage employees, paying outstanding wages, arranging medical checkups, and facilitating repatriation to parents, reveal the severity of the violations that were occurring. Equally concerning is Shein's response to these discoveries. Rather than fundamentally restructuring its business model that creates the conditions for such abuses, the company simply reinforced supplier policies, threatening immediate contract termination for violations. This reactive approach fails to address the root causes: extreme price pressure and impossible production timelines that drive suppliers to cut corners by employing vulnerable workers, including children. Temu, another ultra-fast fashion giant, has rapidly captured market share with its even more aggressive pricing strategy. Both Temu and Shein have perfected not just rapid production, but regulatory evasion through a clever exploitation of U.S. shipping regulations. They utilize what's known as the de minimis exception, a loophole allowing packages valued under $800 to enter the country duty-free, avoiding tariffs and import duties that their competitors must pay. The scale of this exploitation is staggering. According to a June 2023 congressional report, Shein and Temu collectively accounted for over 30% of all packages entering the U.S. in 2022. For perspective, H&M paid $205 million in duty fees during the same period that these ultra-fast fashion companies largely avoided. This loophole doesn't just provide a competitive advantage, it also allows these companies to circumvent inspections that might identify products made with forced labor. The risk of forced labor in these supply chains is substantial. The U.S. Department of Labor specifically identifies garments from China as potentially produced with forced labor, highlighting particular concern regarding Uyghurs, ethnic Kazakhs, and other Muslim minorities from the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. These individuals are frequently subjected to forced labor through state-sponsored labor transfer programs operated by the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, a government paramilitary organization. This connection to potential human rights abuses extends beyond just clothing. The same DOL list includes aluminum and auto parts from China produced using forced labor, illustrating how exploitation can permeate interconnected supply chains. When you purchase that trendy $5 shirt, you're potentially participating in a system linked to systematic repression. What makes these ultra-fast fashion models particularly insidious is their deliberate opacity. Their supply chains are architected with complexity, not for efficiency, but for deniability. Layers of subcontractors, temporary facilities that can be quickly disassembled and relocated, and limited paper trails create a system where accountability becomes nearly impossible. When violations are discovered, brands can claim ignorance while quietly moving production elsewhere, with workers bearing the consequences. This complexity serves another purpose: consumer confusion. When scandals emerge, these companies can point to high-profile sustainability initiatives or charity partnerships while continuing business as usual. That $15 dress in your online shopping cart may have been made in a facility employing children, but the website showcasing it likely features glossy sustainability commitments and vague ethical claims. Consider the t-shirt hanging in your closet with that quirky slogan or trendy graphic. Before it reached you, it likely passed through multiple factories where workers may have faced 100+ degree temperatures without adequate ventilation, been denied bathroom breaks, or worked through injuries to meet impossible quotas. The shirt's journey from exploitation to your wardrobe was facilitated by a deliberately complex system designed to obscure this reality. 5. The perfect crime: how fast fashion evades justice. That deliberately complex system isn't just a coincidence. It's a calculated corporate strategy that would make organized crime syndicates envious. Fast fashion brands have constructed the perfect legal maze where exploitation occurs in plain sight, yet accountability vanishes into thin air. The key to this magic trick? Supply chain fragmentation is deliberately engineered to create plausible deniability. What appears to be a simple transaction between a brand and a factory is actually a labyrinthine network of contractors, subcontractors, and sub-subcontractors. This intricate structure serves a critical purpose: distancing the brand from actual production. When labor violations surface, as they inevitably do, brands can simply claim ignorance while continuing to profit from the very exploitation they've architected. The system allows them to maintain the appearance of ethical business practices while simultaneously driving down costs through what amounts to a global race to the bottom. This strategy enables brands to benefit from rock-bottom labor costs without taking direct responsibility. They can quickly abandon suppliers demanding fair wages in favor of those willing to cut corners. One manufacturer raises concerns about impossible deadlines leading to unsafe conditions. There are dozens more willing to accept those terms without question. This constant threat of replacement creates a perverse incentive system where factory owners themselves become enforcers of exploitation to retain valuable contracts. Perhaps most disturbing is how the fashion industry managed to transform the Rana Plaza tragedy, a moment that should have fundamentally restructured the industry into a public relations opportunity. The Bangladesh Accord on Building and Fire Safety emerged as the flagship response, promising legally binding commitments for independent safety inspections and remediation of hazards. On paper, it looked revolutionary. The reality has been far less impressive. While some factories have undergone renovations and safety upgrades, the Accord's impact has been severely compromised by sluggish implementation and stubborn resistance from both brands and factory owners. Its narrow focus on fire and structural safety, while important, conveniently sidestepped broader labor rights issues like living wages and abuse. The industry effectively channeled public outrage into a limited technical response that avoided addressing the fundamental business model built on exploitation. Meanwhile, the very same companies implicated in deadly factory conditions have mastered the art of reputation laundering through sophisticated corporate social responsibility programs. Brands launch splashy campaigns about recycled materials and carbon offsets while their supply chains remain rife with human rights abuses. This calculated disconnect allows them to attract conscious consumers through environmental claims while maintaining the exploitative labor practices that make their price points possible. The hypocrisy reaches staggering proportions when examining wage transparency. According to the Fashion Transparency Index, a mere 1% of brands disclose how many of their workers earn a living wage. This statistical black hole isn't accidental, it's strategic. By keeping wage information hidden, brands can maintain public-facing ethical commitments while they're actual business. Operations rely on systematic underpayment of workers. Industry-wide, approximately 75 million factory workers produce garments, yet less than 2% earn wages sufficient to meet basic needs. Government corruption further insulates the system from meaningful reform. In garment-producing countries, regulatory officials often function as enablers rather than enforcers. Factory inspections become theatrical performances where violations are temporarily hidden or ignored outright. Bribes ensure advance warnings before inspections or convenient oversights when documenting conditions. The resulting regulatory capture transforms what should be worker protection mechanisms into paper shields for corporate interests. This corrupt system doesn't persist through ignorance. It persists because it's profitable. Western consumers get artificially cheap clothing, brands generate enormous margins, factory owners maintain contracts, and corrupt officials receive payments. The only losers are the millions of garment workers whose bodies and futures are sacrificed to maintain this arrangement. Yet a potential turning point approaches through emerging legislation. The New York Fashion Act would mandate fair labor practices and environmental disclosures if passed, requiring fashion brands to publish their environmental and social due diligence policies. Meanwhile, the EU's Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive promises to hold companies liable for human rights and environmental impacts throughout their supply chains, with meaningful sanctions for noncompliance. These regulatory frameworks could finally pierce the veil of plausible deniability that brands have hidden behind for decades. The fashion industry's response to these initiatives has been telling. Aggressive lobbying to water down requirements, delay implementation timelines, and create loopholes large enough to drive a delivery truck through. Their resistance reveals how central exploitation is to their business model. Real accountability threatens not just their public image, but their fundamental profitability. The $5 shirt isn't a miracle of efficiency, it's evidence of a crime. Every seam represents wages stolen from the world's most vulnerable workers, hidden behind complex supply chains designed to shield corporations from accountability. But we hold significant power to drive change. By researching brands through resources like the Fashion Transparency Index and supporting those committed to ethical practices, we directly influence industry standards. As Teresa Haas from Workers United emphasizes, we need clear means and mechanisms for enforcement, independent complaint mechanisms that allow workers to easily file complaints, and binding labor rights outcomes. Sign the EARTHDAY.org petition. The fashion industry must change. Remember Fashion Revolution's truth. A living wage is not a luxury, it is a fundamental human right.